Hello, and welcome to Andrew Broussard Watercolors. Today I'm continuing with the different toned papers. This is another cut of the Legion Stonehenge, the 90 pound. I'm not sure what tint or tone this is. It kind of seems like a cooler gray or a cooler tan. I'm not quite sure, but I put that piece of white paper next to it for you to see. Hobby Lobby had a whole bunch of sales clearance on their watercolors and oils, so I picked up a whole bunch of different tubes. And I figured I'd just use the tubes for single paint exploration. So here I have their light red, which is PR 101. I think that's the same as the, whatchamacallit, why can't I think of any names today? Burnt Sienna. It's just on the lighter side of things, or more redder. You can see that right in there. Joe Menza had suggested that I massage the tube before I pour it out, and I forgot, so I got some extra, probably gum arabic in there. And I have a tube of white gouache. I did buy their Chinese white. Maybe I should pour that out too. All right, so instead of white gouache, I'll use their Chinese white, which is PW4. I don't know the different PWs. So titanium is PW6. I don't know if this is a zinc PW4. Anyway, we'll use these two tubes for this painting. I coated this paper with water. It does, I do feel like it needs more water than the 140 pound, but we will dive into it. I'll move that cat hair off. The cats did get a good brush in yesterday. All right, so this is going to be the fast and loose approach, kind of letting things build up and explore as we create the scene. That being said, if you like this fast and loose approach, I just kind of refer to it as the tonalist approach. You'll see that oil painters, Stuart Davies, Dennis Sheehan, will use this kind of approach with their landscape creation. And watercolorists, there's a few that start super wet and wet, but they really don't stay in the wet and wet for as long as I often do, but I kind of really like the diffusion and the exploration. So let's see, this tube is really opaque. And I'm not sure if the PR 101, which is this pigment, is kind of a synthetic rust pigment, and PR 102 might be the natural pigment. So if you're buying a more expensive line, you'll see either sourced from the ground pigments or stuff that's synthetic or lab made. The lab made ones will have more of a consistency from tube to tube because of those controls that are taking place, while the source from the ground will often have a uniqueness to it. Yesterday I had painted with the sepia on a piece of paper about this size cut, and it was weird. I don't know if the paper was super saturated or what, but the two pieces that were underneath the side clips had kind of clipped all the way through and tore off at the end. It was the first time I had that happen, but it might be just the 90 pound weight paper. Let's see. This pigment is very opaque and very blocky. I have to really rely on our brush, our paper towel, to pull back and get some different tones. I think less than a year ago I did some experiments with some light red oxide, just starting that as the first initial tube and then kind of playing from there, slowly developing a palette. And on its own, light red oxide I always think of being very opaque, but whenever I had went with those experiments, I found that by itself it didn't seem to have the opacity that it shows with other pigments. But at this point, it might be a matter of whatever tube you're using. Right here, this area doesn't want to lift. That was my initial application. And sometimes this soaks in a little weird, this paper. I think that's what we're seeing there. We could almost scrape back in those spots if we needed to at this point. Pushing some stuff around. If need be, we could spritz and really re-wet. Not something I do often, but seeing how quickly that pigment started drying. I'm going to use the squirrel mop for the Chinese white. I'm really not going to go out of my way to try to get any of it mixed together, but I will kind of let it naturally blend. Chinese white definitely feels different than the whitewash, the titanium white. I think Chinese white was popular or came about in the early 1800s. I think Winsor Newton put it out. Now it's starting to mix with that light red in this area, but we'll see. All right, let's move that out the way. Let's get back to this light red. Very blocky. We could even force a little waterfall right here. I think it just seems to want to happen, so I think we can do that. So put out more of this tube. I have all these little trays from the Asian market, which is great for whenever you're using stuff that's not on the normal palette. And I think the art supply stores sell little different containers too. There you go. That's we have our waterfall in there. I have my scraping tools. Nope. We are not ready yet. Alright. And of course, you're always welcome to follow along. You have my express permission to sign your name to anything you do when you follow along, and you have my express permission to sell anything whenever you follow along. I want you guys to be successful and to have fun and have money for art supplies. And if you'd like to support this channel, I have the Patreon link down below. And I want to thank everybody on the Patreon that supports. With that support, I go and I pick up and experiment with more art supplies, different colors, different pigments, etc. So thank you for your all support. This paint is just so opaque. I'm curious if we'll have a tonal shift when we do a dry off. You can obviously see the composition starting to take place. But it doesn't have the textured variety that I love. That's why there's so much paper towel stamping. Break up some of those lines. I'm actually curious if this paint will have a smell to it. Because sometimes the Chinese watercolors will have a smell to it. I was curious if it had some different binders in it. Can't really smell it that good. Yesterday's video I was complaining about my sinuses. All the cats got brushed and taken care of after that. This here, I'm almost thinking, try to get some rock forms on this edge right here coming down. The water rushing here. And then bring that on the other side. Try to scrape back to white. There we go. Or the tan of the paper. I think that, there we go. It's time to do a dry off. See how things work on top of that. So I'm going to pause the camera, and when I turn it back on, it'll be dried off, and we'll see if there's any shift in the value. Okay, so I'm not sure how much of a shift the camera picked up, but it had an interesting one. Where originally it was more orangey, kind of the sanguine color from Conte, from the base set, more of an orangey effect, maybe a vermilion. Then drying, it pushed a little earthier red, excuse me, more of a, let's see, a Venetian red is where it kind of shifted. So sometimes there's a shift in not just the values of things kind of softening and lightening, there's also the shift in just warmth. Just try brushing this Chinese white on top. Let's see. Horizontal marks for the water plane, vertical marks for the waterfall. All right, let's get back to the hake. And I'm really pushing for a textured buildup rather than just a flat mass tone. Grab the number 4. Kind of break up the symmetry of the left and right by adding tall tree elements here. With yesterday's painting, I was using this sepia, and when I got to this part, my tree trunks were still wet, and I played around with applying the white gouache into that side, and we can see how this will feed in. If it'll do a diffusion and give an interesting effect. Yeah, some areas it catches and it will feed out. Let's see. Look for a foliage. And the number 1 rigger for some thinner, heavier applications. So I haven't decided if I like this tube or not. I have been obviously doing a lot of exploration with the browns and the blacks, and that right there, I just kind of created an inherent bias, but I wanted something more lively. But I don't know if I would go for just a different brand of the light red. or the or Venetian red. I go for the different tints. I do have a few unique tubes of Daniel Smith that probably work very well. I have to see what I have. I'll be mentioning this in all the videos that I have an art show coming up in August and September. And since it's my first kind of solo show, I would like a variety of things in it. And one of the things is just kind of the self-portraits in different mediums. Another is having explorations in different tubes and pigments, monochromatic in different hues. I want to darken this up here. Overlapping effects coming in front. I could bring that over that whole spot. But I want this to be foreground and pushing that waterfall back in the picture plane. Oh, by the way, if you follow along, feel free to tag me or shoot me a message. I have the Instagram and other things linked down below. I would love to see what you come up with. While we're here, throw some different textures in. Not too fond with the way this came out. Okay, let's do a draw-off and then we'll see where we're at. Alright, so did another quick dry-off. Within my mind going through this one, I want to call this a gouache with just how opaque it is. And usually with gouaches, if I understand correctly, they are not as finely ground as watercolor, where watercolor will sit within the paper. So when you wet it, the fibers, I believe they open up and your pigment particles will kind of fall down into that and get trapped. All with gouache, you'll have it sit on top of the paper itself. And I think that's what's happening here. Use the squirrel mop again. I'm just using the squirrel mop just because, excuse me, really trying not to cross-contaminate. Okay, I put out some fresh pigment. I did need the like physically need, as in squish around the tube. There's some parts that I had applied in the last section that are just so heavy and dark. It makes me think of, I'm not sure what it was called historically, or they might have just called it like a red clay. That's what artists had used for the drawings and the twat crayons, things like that. And I think it's like really hard to find that natural clay now. I did read on Wet Canvas, which is a forum a while back, that somebody had went to some art store, I think in Europe or in England, and the person went in the back or went downstairs and brought out like a bag, and they picked through the bag and picked out which chunks of clay that they want. I think traditionally that clay was then sharpened for the artist to draw with. I'm not sure if Natural Pigments has that. That's a website that I picked up some stuff from about 2 years ago, but I had picked up some silver point supplies. I feel like we're at the point where we did a pretty thorough exploration of it and got an interesting feel for what's happening with this paint. I do like the overall feel and the effect of it. I think that it would be interesting to see if somebody was to do the same composition but with burnt sienna, and look for those differences there, or even burnt umber. Burnt umber would probably give a more I don't want to say neutral, but this is just very vibrant. This is just bam in your face with this. So I'm curious how others would look. And it dried very dark in some spots, so it does have quite a value shift, a value range. Getting to those light values was quite difficult. I had to really rely on the paper towel and using the spritzer bottle to light things back. So on that note, I think that's everything to discuss. I hope you enjoyed. If you'd like to see more of this one, let me know. And if you'd like to see this tube mixed with anything else, let me know. Please like, subscribe, follow, and have a great day. Bye.